Assalamu alaikum everyone, and welcome to the last session in the series of end-of-life planning. Hope you're all keeping well and safe. Those who have been with us through all the sessions, you will be aware that we covered lasting power of attorney, will and estate planning, and advanced care planning. Our experts also tried to answer your questions, and we hope you will have taken the necessary steps to sort out documentations. I think Ghazal has already mentioned she's going to check on everyone. These sessions have definitely made me realize the importance of planning for end of life and the documentation I need to prepare myself. Following this final session, the presentations and sessions recordings will be uploaded. We were just waiting for this session to be over, and details will be communicated soon. In today's session, Ghazala Ben, Moisbai, and Akil will cover death certificate and registering death, digital legacy and organ donation, and preparing the last rites. Now, in terms of last rites, I know Akil has been putting a documentation together, what each branches do when that happens locally. So hopefully he will be able to provide some information along with Moisbai. As per our past sessions, if you have any questions, feel free to use the Zoom chat function. Who will go through the questions after the presentations. Before I hand over to Ghazala Ben, please bear in mind the Zoom rules. I'm sure you are aware of it by now. Ghazala Ben, over to you.
Thank you very much, Anika. Assalamu alaikum all again. Welcome to the Serving the Community series. As just again a reminder, these are sessions about advanced planning for the end of life. Here we look at how we can prepare for our end of life by making our wishes known so that we are looked after the way we want and make it easeful for those around us. Today is the last session in this series. We look at what do you want to happen after your death. And as Anika has said, we will cover the following topics: organ and body donation, funeral planning, care of the body, which will be covered by Akil and Moisbai, death certificate, and one tell service. So before I start the session, I want to address a couple of questions which have been put to me. One of the questions was suggestions of the order in which to do the advanced planning. Most important part is the thinking bit and having a dialogue with your loved one or having a family meeting. You can also draw on previous knowledge of family or friends about their dying experience. This may include a so-called good death in which a loved one's wishes were followed to the end, or a death that was particularly difficult, painful, prolonged, or left a great deal of unresolved feelings. You want to draw on your past experience to say what you or your loved one would want and what you want to avoid. It's quite important to do the thinking part before we start filling up the paperwork. And as I said to you, sometimes it's easier to play games or to share your hopes, dreams, and wishes. This way you can have an important conversation in a light-hearted way. You may remember I shared with you some conversation cards, the talk about cards especially, which we tried in thinking about how to think about these important topics, the Marie Curie cards. These are free for you to request from Marie Curie. To get the legal document signed, once you've done the thinking and the talking, to get the legal document signed in the right order, in my view, I'd do the advance statement first, then the advance decision to refuse treatment, then go and do the lasting power of attorney. I'd then write in the LPA that my attorneys need to follow my advance statement. And then obviously you need to do the will, which is quite important, that whatever you are for those who are leaving behind. And I would do that as well. And in the will, I will do a statement of wishes to cover digital legacy, which we will cover today. I'll move on to the second question, which was, how do you become an end-of-life doula? So the organization called Living Well, Dying Well offers the end-of-life doula training. They train ordinary people who'd like to gain the confidence, knowledge, and skills needed to be with those who are dying. They offer training not as a medical role, but a community-led response to support, practically, emotionally, and spiritually, to those at the end of their lives, as well as their family. There's a 5-day foundation course. You can choose to progress on to diploma and do a part 2 and a part 3 diploma. The total course is over 20 days and you can complete it over 18 months. They offer training in Hebden Bridge in Yorkshire and Iford near Lewes in Sussex. So let me move on to digital legacy. The definition of a digital asset is broad. It includes digital contents, accounts, files created and stored online or on clouds, your digital devices such as your computers, tablets, smartphones, smartwatches, etc. Examples of digital assets includes your email, photos, videos, and text files, your online banking accounts, accounts with traders such as the eBay, Amazon, internet payments account like PayPal, your social media such as the Twitter and Facebook, your blogs, media stores, players such as iTunes, your online gaming account, such as your PlayStation and Xbox, and so on and on. You need to plan your digital legacy and express your decision in a will or a letter of wishes attached to your will, stipulating that executors may have access to online accounts and where these accounts are and whether they should be deleted after death. For each account, you need to provide a username and password and specific wishes in relation to the individual account. This is best done in the letter of wishes, and you can appoint a digital executor in your will to access, download, and close the accounts. Some online accounts where you've purchased, say, your Amazon or Kindle books, they can be shared rather than getting deleted, while other accounts with licenses expire when you die. Facebook and Instagram give you an option to either delete account or have it memorialized. It is on the setting on the menu, you go on to manage account and then enter the name of the person who you want for managing your legacy account. Why do it? So that your loved one can access your account and do the needful. Too often, digital assets are lost, as no one other than the deceased is aware of their existence. If you don't plan for preserving your digital life, your loved ones will lose your legacy. I'd like to share a personal story here. My uncle, a geologist who lived in US on his own, died suddenly of a heart attack, no warning at all. He always talked about that he had bought a land in Colorado which had oil. Due to his sudden death, we discovered there was no will. It took a long time to sort out his proceeds and his inheritance. However, we had no correspondence of this land which he talked about, which he bought, and we had no way of accessing his computer, his emails, or anything on it. So we did not know, as we didn't know his password. So that land and the asset has been lost. So I'm going to move on to organ and body donation. I must say this topic is not for Islamic theological debate here, but it provides you information only. Organ donation is giving an organ or tissue to help someone who needs a transplant after you die. Organ donation in England have changed to an opt-out system from 20th May 2020. The opt-out system works on the understanding that all adults have agreed to become organ donors when they die, unless they have made it known that they do not wish to donate. If you have not recorded an organ donation decision and you're not in one of the excluded groups, which I'll talk about in a minute, it'll be considered that you agree to donate your organs when you die. It's still for you to decide not to donate your organs, but you must register your choice online or by telephone. So if you decide to donate your organs, then what is it that you're donating, your organs and tissues? The organs are your heart, your lungs, liver, kidneys, pancreas, small bowel, and the tissues are skin, bones, tendons, your corneas, heart valves, and arteries, etc. So there are people who are excluded from the automatic opting in. And these are those who are under 18, people who lack the mental capacity to understand the new arrangements, visitors to England, and people who have lived in England for less than 12 months before they die. All these things apply to England. Wales have already done their opt-out some while back, and Scotland is happening this autumn starting from next March. So now this organ donation is slightly different from donation of body to medical science. Donation of your body to medical education, training, and research is done by a consent form and needs to be witnessed, and the minimum age for that is 17 years. It's quite imperative that whatever decisions you take, you should communicate it to the next of kin and those close to you. So moving on to funeral planning. This is about expressing your wishes in respect of your funeral, which is quite distinct from prepaid funeral plans. The Islamic way of attending to the body and the funeral is going to be dealt with a little later. But just to mention that there are lots of other choices which people make here, which is having a formal, informal service, not for us, but for others to think about whether they want a cremation or burial and where would they like it. What sort of coffin would they want? Wooden, wicker, cardboard, or just a shroud? Would they like a memorial service? Where would they have it? Would they want flowers, music, songs, poetry, and any donation to charity? Now, registration of death. Just want to talk a bit about this. So your birth, death, and marriages are registered with the local council. Registering a death should be done within 5 days after the death has been verified and certified by the doctor or hospital. This certification by the doctor is usually sent directly to the local council registrar, especially if the death happens in a hospice or a hospital. So you need to contact the local council register office by phone or internet and get an appointment to register the death. The process is simple. It only takes half an hour, but you should have all the documentations with you when you go to register. Who can do this? A relative should go and register the death. If a relative cannot be around, cannot do it for any reason, then the person, any person who were there at the time of the death, or the person who found the body, or anyone who is in charge of making funeral arrangements. What do you need to take with you when you go to register your death? Register the death. A birth certificate, driving license, council tax, marriage or civil partnership certificate, NHS medical card or NHS number, passport, proof of address. Now, some of these documentation may not be available, so you need to talk to the registrar before going to say what you have. But it's always very helpful if all these documents are kept in one place and you tell someone about it. In addition to this, when you go there, you'll need to tell the registrar the full name of the person at the time of death, any maiden names they had or any previous names they had, the person's date and place of birth, their last address, their occupation, the full name, date of birth, and occupation of a surviving or late spouse or civil partner, whether they were getting any state pension or any benefits. It's quite important to actually have all this, and with all your emotions going in, it's very hard. It's always good to have someone accompany you. 2 people going always helps. What happens? The documents you will get when you register the death is a certificate for burial or cremation. This is the green form. It gives permission for a burial or an application for a cremation. So you need to hand this over to whoever then does the next process. You also get a certification of registration of death, which is also called the Form BD8. You can buy extra death certificates. It's quite good to get some at the same time for £4 because you'll need this to sort out the personal affairs. They all need original certificates like the probate office, etc. So it's good to get at least 3 or 4 extra ones. Tell Us One service. This is a service which has come in recently, the last few years, which is the Tell Us One service, which is there to inform all relevant government departments when someone dies. So some registration officers at the local council will either complete this Tell Us One service with you and give you a unique reference number. So you can use that to tell other services yourself or do it online or by telephone. So again, before you use the One Tell service, you'll need the same sort of details about the person. So it's the date of birth, the driving license number, the national insurance, vehicle registration, passport number. You also need the details of the entitlement they were getting. For example, the state pension, blue badge, name and addresses of surviving partners, etc. With this service, what's very good is when you do this, you don't have to keep going back to for example, all these people, the HMRC, the DWP, the passport office, the DVLA, local council, blue badge, electoral register. They all know with one call rather than ringing all of them. It's quite useful that way. So, thank you again for listening. I hope you will all think about the issues we have discussed in this Death and Dying series. I have identified doulas in Birmingham and London who could help you with doing your advanced planning, but I'm also available to help you to make your advanced plans as you go along. So with me finishing this, I'm going to hand over to Akhil and Moisbai to do the part 2. Thank you again.
Okay, thanks Ghusl Auntie. Assalamu alaikum everyone. So we'll basically just run through how to essentially prepare a janaza ready for burial. We've been preparing a document for a while, for a few months. This document will be available on the Jamaat Google Drive, so everyone will access it. There is still some information pending from some areas around the country, and it will continually be updated. So if things change, if phone numbers change, new contacts and all of those types of things, then we'll continue to update it. But at least then it's a source of information for everyone. You can download a copy if you want, print it off yourself, print it off for somebody else if they need it, or just refer to it digitally. It doesn't matter. So I'm going to share the screen of the document. Essentially, we'll just run through it, and then inshallah we'll we'll see how we go. Again, as Hur mentioned in the chat earlier, if you have any questions, just please type them in, either from what Ghusl Aunty was talking about, either from now or from previous sessions, and also anything that we go through. The document that we have made, we've tried to make relatively generic, because each individual branch or area will have slight nuances and differences with the way they run things, but we tried to keep it kind of the way that we, as Dawdi Boraz would do it, just to make it accessible to as many people as possible. So I'm just going to share this screen. Okay, so obviously as a, we'll essentially start from the top. So essentially, when a person has died and that death has been confirmed, the first thing that we will do is to send a message to the society to let them know that who has passed away, where they're passed away from. Everyone, hopefully, who's on the system anyway, and those who aren't, know that there is a text message or WhatsApp system. So we have a text message leaders group. The 5 names here. Let me just. So we've got the 5 leaders here and their individual phone numbers. You can, if you want to, contact your local branch secretary, who can forward it on to one of us, and then literally within kind of 5 or 6 minutes, it will get distributed relatively quickly to the rest of the Jamaat. I've also left here an example message, so you can copy and paste this into WhatsApp or just retype it, just to make it easier. It's a fairly standard message that goes out. So the next part is related to obtaining the death certificate. Ghusl Aunty has pretty much kind of explained that anyway. The only thing that we potentially add is that you may not necessarily be provided with a death certificate straight away if there's a referral to a coroner. So the coroner will just delay proceedings. It can take a few days, even sometimes up to 10 days. So it can be fairly lengthy depending on the cause of death and other circumstances around it. If the deceased does get referred to a coroner, then the coroner themselves will issue the death certificate. Will issue the death certificate. So that's the only change. The rest of it is the same. It's basically pretty much lifted from what Ghusl Aunty said anyway. So you need to go and register the death within 5 days. Must be registered by an immediate family or somebody else who was there, as mentioned. You need to go with ID. There was one time that I've been actually asked for my own ID. I'm not 100% sure, but just take it with you just in case. And then ID details for the deceased as well. Again, additional copies. And then the Tell Us Once service. So the Tell Us Once service, again, you can get that unique reference, and then that just makes providing information to all the other departments much easier. There's also a link. So the link that Ghusl Aunty put on her slideshow, if you it's got the link on here, so you can just click on it. It takes you straight to the government website, and then you can get that details as well. So what we've left on here then is the registry offices just for the main Jamaats. Obviously, there are people who are isolated in other towns and cities. Eastbourne, primary example. We put the main numbers down. All of these numbers are available online anyway. Just type in your local area, type in registry office, and the number should come up. It is the same registration office for births and deaths, so it should be widely available. Okay, so again, just repeating more of what Ghusl Aunty said, you'll receive a green form. So that is the form that you will need to be able to perform the burial itself. So usually it's the team at the cemetery that will take that off you. And then your certificate of registration of death as well. So you don't need to give a certificate of registration at the cemetery, but good just to take one with you anyway. Okay, so in terms of the actual burial process itself, the first thing you need to arrange is a slot at the cemetery for the burial, okay? So in Leicester and in Birmingham and in Peterborough, there are Jamaat plots that have already been bought. So you may choose to use one of those plots, or you may have bought already or purchased prior to that your own burial plots. Or if you don't have one, you can actually just buy a completely fresh one direct. You will need, if you're using a pre-purchased plot, you will need to have the deeds. So for example, I'll speak mainly about Birmingham because Dad's here and we do it all the time, but there's a similar process in Leicester anyway. But the burial plots in Birmingham are registered in Dad's name. So anyone who wants to use one of the Jamaat plots basically gets in touch. Once we find out anyway, Dad would need to bequeath the deeds to the person who has passed away. And then that person can then be buried in that plot. I think in Leicester, it's in Leicester Jamaat's name, I think. I'm not 100% sure. You'll need to give a size for the grave. Generally speaking, they will dig a standard size grave, which is 6 foot by 3 foot. If an alternative size is required, for example, if the deceased is slightly larger, you might need a larger grave, or if they're very, very small, you may need a smaller one. But the standard size is 6 foot by 3 foot. But you just kind of take that as it is. Sometimes if the person has passed away in a hospital, they'll sometimes mention that to you as well, just to give you some guidance before the body is transported away. So the next thing I've got on here is the cemetery numbers. Again, literally just the same 5 sets of numbers: so Birmingham, Leicester, London, Bradford, and Peterborough. And the main cemeteries that we use, I put 2 in London, just because we kind of tend to switch between Hendon and Stanmore Cemetery. So I've got the numbers on there. But again, just Google it and the numbers should come up without any issues. Okay, so the actual process of organizing the funeral, so you need a venue. It's not such an issue at the moment during COVID because we're not meeting in that way in congregation. But as a general rule, you would probably need a venue if you're doing niyaz. You need to choose a caterer if you choose to serve food, and if time allows. You'll need somebody to perform the burial. So this is basically somebody to kind of preside over the burial, to do the du'as while you're doing the physical action of completing the burial and reciting Sadaqallah. You'll need to purchase a coffin for the burial. So the Jamaat does not have its own coffins. You can have them made. Again, Ghazal to refer to whether, much of the time they use kind of chipboard and they have linings and there's all sorts of things, but you can choose wicker and all of those types of things. Now, one thing that has become more common recently is that there are a lot of shroud burials that are being allowed, which didn't used to be allowed as much before, but they're becoming a little bit more common. And so just at the bottom here, we've basically put down that if the cemetery, and you need to contact the cemetery to see whether they will allow it. So sometimes different parts of the same cemetery will allow it because of the heights and the depths of the ground and things. So speak with the cemetery. If they allow a shroud burial and you wish to just bury the shroud on its own without the coffin, you can sometimes actually return the coffin. So essentially what you're doing is hiring the coffin, because they can be quite expensive. It can be up to 150, sometimes 250 pounds. And so you can sometimes return it. Now, what has happened recently is that where we've gone to do a burial and they have said that they will do a shroud burial, we tend to bury the coffin in there anyway, rather than transport it back. But it's an option, it's down to individual choice. So we don't, as I said, Jamaat doesn't have its own coffins. They can be purchased sometimes from the Ghusl venue, or if you use the services of a funeral director, then you can purchase one from there as well. Some cemeteries also require a nameplate. So that's the kind of essentially like a metal plate with the, usually it has the name and date of birth, I think. Oh, date of birth and the date of death of the deceased as well. And that just so that if anything happens, then they need to exhume the body for whatever reason, then they've got an identification plate. So again, just check with that. You'll need to arrange that separately. Then sometimes the ghusl venue can do that for you, or a funeral director, or you can actually just go to like a jeweler or something, and sometimes they'll be able to produce one fairly quickly for you as well for that. Again, just check the size of the coffin. Again, standard size is 6 foot by 3 foot. Next thing is you're going to need to arrange transport for the body. So you'll need to arrange transport. If the person passed away in the hospital, you need to arrange transport to take the janaza from the hospital to the ghusl facility, or wherever you're going to store that body before the burial. And you will also need to then arrange for the transport from that site to the cemetery itself as well. Okay, so again, Jamaat doesn't have its own hearse, so again, using the funeral director. We have in the past used kind of people's vans, Jamaat people's vans as well. Just whatever you feel comfortable with. It's just a mode of transport at the end of the day. So choose whatever makes you feel comfortable. And then this last thing is just about the shrine burial, which I've alluded to previously. So we go on to preparing the janazah. Now, essentially, in this particular document, we haven't gone into much detail. Every single detail on how to do ghusl, the actual act of doing ghusl, all the niyats, all the du'as, the what materials to use, when to use them, what order to use them, everything is in Our Way of Life, the entire thing. So it's either in Our Way of Life or it's in the Mutasaifa. The stuff in Our Way of Life has actually been lifted from the Mutasaifa, so they're exactly the same. So we haven't bothered retyping all of that on here. So most of that is on there. So you'll need to find somewhere to do ghusl. So what we've got here in this section is some of the places. Again, you can see some of the places are not filled out, but we tend to use Husseiniya Masjid, which is on Regent's Park Road in Small Heath. We tend to use that kind of exclusively. Leicester will have their own. Again, we'll populate those details as well. But we've put some contact numbers for some of these people who have already kind of got relationships with these places. So it just makes that process a lot easier. So you can contact any of these people as well who have experience in here. So you'll need to have a team to perform the ghusl. So it will be a male team for a male deceased and female team for female deceased. In Birmingham, you contact mum or dad. In Leicester, Amir Kapasi or Maria Ben Mafta. In London, they are trying to arrange a couple of people. Recently, in the past, where the Jamaat in London has struggled, we've gone up, either there's some members who've gone up from Leicester and sometimes from Birmingham as well, just to help with that. So there's people available in the Jamaat who may be able to help as well, but we're trying to identify teams in London who can kind of just service London Jamaat as well. We'll do the same again for Bradford and Peterborough. So you will need 4 people to perform the ghusl as a minimum. Kind of more is helpful. I probably wouldn't say you want more than 6, because it starts to get a little bit kind of crowded and congested and very difficult. They should be physically able. It is not an easy process. That you need some physical capability to be able to do it. It is also, for somebody who's never done it before, it's quite a sombering experience. And I think that if you are looking to have somebody there, and it's always very, very nice to have someone close to this deceased as well, to help to perform the ghusl. I think it's a very nice thing for them to do. But if they're feeling uncomfortable or apprehensive, I think it's nice for those people who are comfortable doing it to approach them and just have a chat with them and say, look, this is not an easy thing to do for some people, but it is a very satisfying thing. I think also you have a sense of privilege when you're doing it. I certainly do. I have every single time I've been. I feel honored to be able to do and perform the last rites for that person. And I think if you frame it in that way, sometimes it just gives people a little bit of confidence to do it. And I think it's nice for them if they can do it, you know, for someone that they've cared about. You'll need PPE, again, referring to Birmingham Jamaat, where we go in Small Heath. They provide full body overalls, they provide gloves, masks and everything. I think certainly now with COVID and everything, it's almost a must. We have incorporated that into our Ghusl box. Most of these places, if you go into isnashris or places, and even to be honest, in most of the Sunni masjids as well, they will have that available. They may not necessarily have it in the funeral directors just because their system is a little bit different. But again, if you're performing the Ghusl, or if you're having Jamaat people perform the Ghusl, then make sure you either check with a venue or make sure you arrange it yourself, yeah? Because I think it is quite important nowadays with COVID and everything, and it's going to become standard practice, I would have thought. So you will need to take to the Ghusl facility, obviously the Ghusl materials. You'll need to have the coffin arranged to be there. You will need coffin material. The coffin material is very specifically plain white cotton. It cannot be stitched at all. Okay, so no seams or hems or anything like that. If somebody has performed Umrah or Hajj, you can use that material. It is exactly the same. That's why we perform Umrah and Hajj in that material. It is the same for your burial. But in addition, if they have performed Hajj or Umrah and you are using that material, you will need another piece of material to cover the entire body. Okay, so for example, if an average person, say for example, an average person is 6 foot, you may want to have a material which is at least 8 foot long, just to make sure that it can cover. Yeah, so again, all the details are in Our Way of Life anyway. It's got all the measurements as well, so it's fairly easy to follow. So some of the materials, again, everything is written in Our Way of Life, but I've just highlighted a few things. There's the sidr leaves, there's kapur, and there's sandalwood, and that's just the materials that we use to actually perform the ghusl itself. One thing that I'll add here, we use the Ishnasri facility. They've got a brilliant facility where they have all of this water pre-prepared in RO machines. So you literally just pick up a shower hose and you use it and the water filters through. The one thing that they don't have in there, they don't use it anyway, is the sandalwood in that water. These are suggested items, they are recommended items, that, you know, none of these things are necessarily kind of set in stone. So where we have performed ghusls before in the Ishnasri facility, we've used the sidr leaves and we've used kapur in the water, but we haven't used sandalwood water because it's not in, we used to use, before that, we used to mix it in a bucket and use that water. Now we're using their system, their reverse osmosis system. We don't put the sandalwood in. So we just use the kapur, but we use the sandalwood in a different place. So you can use it if you want to, but you'll probably need to mix it yourself in those facilities. Again, and this is why I've kept it very generic, because each facility has different, you know, they have different facilities.
You say, if the Sunnis, you wouldn't get this, you have to take your own.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, that's one important thing. So if you're using a Sunni facility, they perform their 3 ghusls only with pure water. So if you are using a Sunni facility, then you will need to take some leaves with you, mix it with the water and use those things, and the same for the kapur and the sandalwood as well. So yeah, that's a good point. So you'll need towels, cotton wool, scissors as well to cut the clothing. If they are already dressed, you will need to cut the clothing. You won't be able to remove them otherwise. Take a copy of Our Way of Life or the Mu'tasefa as well, and then it's got all the du'as in there as well. So once you've got the date for the burial, then basically inform the community about the funeral. So I put a template message which you can copy and paste, send that out to WhatsApp. It's got a rough basic timing on there. Obviously everything is going to be different, but you can just copy and paste that, amend as necessary. On the day of the funeral, there's items as well to be taken. So some of them water, some material to cover the burial site. So agarbatti if you want to, flower wreaths and things if they've been arranged. And right at the bottom, we've put some costing. So this is just to give an idea for families about what they can be looking for. I put an example costing for Birmingham just because I know those figures, and they are kind of up to date as of current as of now. I'll put a date on there actually, just so that people are aware. These things change and can increase quite rapidly over the years, but it's just so that, again, you know, as part of this pre-life planning and the wills and all of the rest of it, that people prepare for the costings of the actual funeral itself. You know, you can pay into these, you know, funeral cost insurances and all of these types of things. If you've already pre-planned it in your will, then at least, again, your family doesn't need to be, you know, need to worry about it. So, you know, it's just good to know. And that's basically it, really. It's all the information, as I said, will be uploaded. It will be available on the DBWS drive. Dad's here, I'm here. There's, you know, your local people, you know, Rahim, Mustananko, you know, all of these people have done many of these things. They're well versed, and obviously you've got the veterans, Mushin Uncle, and all these other guys as well for support and advice. If you have any questions, if you read the document and you feel like there's something important that we should put in there, please let us know. Let's update it and make it as user-friendly as possible. Okay, thanks guys.
Thank you, Ghazal, and thank you.